Good evening again. Thank you so much for joining us for tonight's community conversation. This is a new program for us, and we're really looking forward to it being a series of discussions about topics of significance to our local and regional art, history, and cultural community. The goal of community conversations, it's a regular series open to all, and will feature the voices of our community of artists, guest collaborators, and museum staff. We will unpack questions and ideas present in our current exhibitions. And please do stay tuned for future topics and dates. And most, also of interest, stay tuned for the move to in-person programs as well, coming to a museum near you. But we hope to keep doing some kind of hybrid because we want as wide an audience to benefit from these as possible. So we were inspired to have tonight's community conversation about unpaid labor and art by, of course, Sawyer Rose's exhibition, now at NUMU, Carrying Stones, on view physically. So please run, do not walk to come see this exhibition now open at our museum. Sawyer's work features sculptures that are physical manifestations of the unpaid labor women face in our society. One of her portraits in particular, Renee, lays bare how, in many cases, those who even are successful full-time artists and are respected in the art world continue to still have a difficult time making a living, even with that kind of wide recognition. And we've all heard the cliche about the starving artist. And we also know that artists are one of the professions hardest hit by the pandemic. I remember we had a conversation on Zoom about this back in March, I think it was, and we talked about a few different facets of this. 95% of artists recorded income loss as a direct impact of the pandemic, and 80% experienced a decrease in work that generated their income. And we also see some really interesting stats about the arts and culture sector in Silicon Valley. There's we have this awareness that in Silicon Valley, we have some of the smallest arts organizations, and yet the highest degree of wealth. So all of these things play together to create a really, kind of challenging landscape for artists and cultural workers in our community. But one thing that is so interesting to me is that 76% of those surveyed by this particular Californians for the Arts survey said that their artistic practice has been used to raise morale, create community cohesion, or lighten the pandemic experience of the community. So clearly we all know and value the work of artists and our cultural institutions, and yet where do we make sure that artists have the support that they need? So we've been reflecting on these issues and really want to be a part of a paradigm that moves from starving artists to thriving artists, as said by the California Arts Advocates. So I really want to thank our panelists today, Pilar and Carmen, and Alyssarhaye will be talking more about their bios and their role in our arts community. And before Alyssarhaye does that, I do want to thank our sponsors, of course. Major support for Sawyer Rose Carrying Stones is provided by 6 Cents, with additional program support by the Town of Los Gatos, the Borganic Foundation, Jan Swartz and Bob Baden, the Kelly family, Wanda Kaunacki, the Michael and Elise Parsons Foundation, County of Santa Clara Commission on the Status of Women, and the San Jose Women's Club. We also want to thank those that support our virtual programs, including Badger Meter and the Silicon Valley Community Foundation. So thank you for being here again. I'm going to pass the mic back to Alyssarhaye, and we're going to get this conversation going.
Hi, folks. Thanks again for joining us. Just a fair warning, I have a camera assistant today. His name is Bixby, and he may show up on screen at some point today, but he won't be making any comments. I would like to introduce our fine panelists. These are two folks who are heavily integrated in the arts world of the Silicon Valley. We have Carman Tyra Gaines and Pilar Agüero-Esparza. And first up, I would like to introduce Carmen Gaines. She is of Local Colors San Jose.
Hi, thank you for having us part of this conversation. As Alyssarhaye had said, I am Carmen. I am born and raised here in the beautiful Muwekma Ohlone, Silicon Valley. And I've worked in the nonprofits art sector for a little over 4 years now. And I just look forward to sharing this space and having this conversation with you all today.
Thank you, Carmen. And up next, we have Pilar.
Hi, everybody. Am I unmuted now? Okay. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for the invitation to participate in this panel discussion. I think the questions that you guys put together are really awesome and very timely in trying to think a little bit about kind of coming out of this pandemic and you know, being able to go back to museums and go back to gathering. So it's a lot of like, what's that going to be like, right? But yes, my name is Pilar Agüero-Esparza, and I've been here in San Jose since 1991 after I did my undergrad at UC Santa Cruz, but I'm originally from Los Angeles. But now, of course, now I'm a Northern California person and really have been working throughout the Bay Area in different arts organizations. And currently I teach visual art, which is really what I've been doing for the last 15 years at the Harker School, which is a private high school here in San Jose. And basically that's kind of been the hustle to be able to continue my own art practice, right? Because we all have to figure out how are we going to make it? How are we going to be able to keep a roof in the studio in this pretty expensive place that we live in, right? But I love teaching. I've loved my students and been able to combine my love of art and my art practice with the teaching profession. So I feel very lucky about that.
Cool. Thank you both again for being here. I wanted to, so really, as Amy mentioned, the bulk of our conversation really stems from our current exhibition, Sawyer Rose Carrying Stones, and the unpaid labor that goes into life, but for today, specifically the arts sector, and really just being an artist as a full-time career or part-time career. And so the first question I would like to ask Carmen and Pilar is kind of in reference to that hustle that Pilar mentioned. And so what experiences, whether you were paid or unpaid, that either of you have had that really helped shape your artistic career and really kind of push you to keep going in such a kind of strenuous career?
Yeah, well, sure. I'd like to have a stab at that question. You know, Alyssarhaye, it's been really interesting to throughout my experience here in Silicon Valley to see different experiences and different, even like this panel, right? Being able to connect with people as a real connection to what I do in my practice, right? Because sometimes I think being an artist is very isolating, you know, when you're in your studio trying to make your work. So being able to connect on panels or what have you is really cool. But you know, so I see opportunities from something that can be kind of small to exhibition opportunities, of course, as part of the ecosystem of things that could be really beneficial for me. So like, for instance, just about a couple years ago, I was in an exhibition at the Palo Alto Art Center, and a little after the show ended, so the curator, Selene Foster, was looking for someone to help, to assist an artist that was doing another program at the center. And she's Jill Miller, who teaches at UC Berkeley. And so she's like, oh, I need someone who knows how to sew. Would you mind, you know, you think you could be her assistant? And she was a little bit embarrassed about asking me. And I'm like, wow, when I looked up Jill's work, I'm like, oh my God, I would love to work with Jill, right? And not so much, I'd love to assist her, right? I wanted to observe her. I wanted to see her own practice and see how she was doing her workshops. And I felt that was such an incredible connection, and to be able to participate with her. And yes, I was helping, right? So some people might say, oh, you're too old to be able to do that. You should be doing, you should be presenting. And I mean, really the nature of that experience, I was able to see how Jill worked. And really later on, Jill connected me to another opportunity, a colleague of hers in Kansas who was putting together an exhibition. And she said, oh, you should look at Pilar's work. And so now I'm in a group show in Kansas for next year, right? So you just don't know, right? I mean, you have to make very distinct choices about what you need and what you want and garner, right? For your own knowledge, for your own work. And I felt that was a kind of a great experience that I think most people would be like, no, that's not for me. But I was able to really make a great connection with another artist that I didn't necessarily see it as strategic for a show, but then that ended up opening a door, right? So that's what's kind of interesting about taking certain experiences, and maybe you might think like, oh, this is just a job, right? That it's not always that the case, right? It's actually something that can help you with your practice.
My career path in the arts has been as an arts administrator. I'm an art lover, art supporter. I do art for my own cathartic release, but in terms of work, arts administration was the path that I fell in love with early on at a really short internship with MACLA. And then after graduating, from San Francisco State and really falling in love with the artist community there. I went on California Arts Council and looked at opportunities and found an internship at a nonprofit gallery in San Francisco. And that was a very blended experience. I did eventually grow into a paid full-time position, but I ended up, extending my internship just because I knew the value of what I was getting in terms of the experience, but I wasn't being paid. And I was really paying for the experience, and living in San Jose throughout college and throughout all time, and commuting and being a part of that. And I think just my Caltrain pass was around like $250 a month, and I was working part-time to fulfill the time requirement for an unpaid internship. And I really learned so much, but it was a very strenuous task indeed. And I do think it's fortunate because I think it was like one of the last like unpaid interns, which I would love to be the last of anything in in that category, because that labor, even if you're learning on the job, it deserves that same kind of recognition as other administrative positions.
I really like that you've both really experienced kind of had these unpaid experiences that really brought something else into fruition. I, aside from being the newest NUMU team member as the communications and administrative manager, outside of the museum, I am Black Sheep Made. I am a fiber artist, and I teach both virtual and in-person workshops and private lessons. And this was something that I started in high school in college, to really fund an internship abroad I had. And at the time, when I first started, I was only selling my beanies for like $8, $10. It really just covered the yarn. And while I wasn't making anything and everything I made went to pay for my program, me just going out to these smaller markets around town, these farmers markets, art markets, or posting up at a table on my college campus, it did wonders for exposure. And I think that a lot of galleries, in fact, will say, oh, you can be in our gallery for exposure, but we take a large cut. Or you can show at our coffee shop, but we also take a cut. And I think as an artist, we really have to focus on what we want out of a particular event, whether, do we want to participate because we can practice and kind of, oh, I can see how these paintings are going to do or how this wall hanging is going to go. And then from there, really use those opportunities to kind of finesse our own work. And while it is only going in a coffee shop, at least I'm practicing getting out there. I'm practicing installation. I will always be thankful for coffee shops forcing me to install my own work, and therefore having to learn how to hang things on fishing wire and nails that probably shouldn't be holding these really heavy structures. And so with every experience, I think you definitely learn something, and you may not have a monetary gain, but it will for sure help you push your career further in some way.
That's so interesting. Like, the answers, that I'm hearing, it's like there's no shortage of great opportunities for exposure and getting your work out there. But yet, many of them don't provide sort of a living wage or, are really worth the time that go into them. And not, yeah, so I'm curious, with all of that in mind, like experience, exposure, what have you come to know your own value and have the confidence to advocate for what your work is worth?
I've been fortunate enough to work in a few different experiences, and like feeling that freedom of will and that I'm a human first, and I work because I live in a capitalist system, and maybe one day we'll have a new system where bartering and exposure are perfectly fine in covering our needs to live sustainable lives. And whenever I've encountered just not being able to fulfill those basic needs in a workspace, not just in forms of compensation, but even just like your day-to-day experience in a space, we spend so much time to our paid labor, that 40 plus hours, or 32 for California full-time wage. That's a lot of time, and you should want to do something that is rewarding to you. And if it's not rewarding in an economical sense, then yes, definitely it should be something that you're willing to go through the emotions for. And that has definitely grew over time, probably in the last 4 years, and just kind of appreciating the experiences that I have had, and how that informs and helps me be an asset. Like I can now be in a position to teach people. And I think once you're in that knowledge sharing, again, because we live in a capitalist system, like it should be compensated in the same way. And being on the other side of that, with local color, local colors provides multifaceted opportunities for the creative sector. It began in public murals, grew into artists in residence workspaces, and now fiscal sponsorship. So I deal with the idea of compensation and valuing one's work on a daily basis. And even if there was a project that came across to us with another nonprofit, and they were looking for a playscape mural to be painted in at the Casitas de Esperanza in San Jose, and it's an interim housing. And you want to provide art for children in a difficult transition, like that's not, there's so much value in what that work can provide to a community, but there was no funding for it. So in that instance, we just had a very transparent conversation with the artists. Like, we don't have any budget for this. We appreciate your time that you're spending on hot asphalt to lay down some joy. And we were able to find, some funding for them to, and provide all the materials and kind of that basic cost, but I think, just measuring both the work, the skill, the experience, and the resources that are available.
Yeah, finding, what you're worth. It is a process, right? Being able to kind of like balance how much experience you have and how long you've been doing it, how big the piece is, or what is it that you're trying to put a price tag on, right? And I think the biggest thing too is time, right? So ultimately, what is your time worth? And that's all, Amy, it's been just through kind of living and experiencing things, talking with other artists. I certainly do have a lot of respect for institutions and nonprofit organizations that ask artists to do something to provide an honorarium for that, right? And it's, I think, challenging organizations to do that as well, right? Being able to say, hey, if you're asking us to have input, give some of our time, participating in a panel, what have you, that most organizations that have a lot more respect for artists, that they provide something, right, for that work, for that labor. But I think it is a process that you need to sort of live through it as well. Because I love the way that Alyssarhaye was talking about, like doing all these different things in a coffee shop and just posting up your wares, your stuff on your college campus, right? Like you have to start somewhere. You have to kind of begin, but after a certain point, you do have to start putting, like, maybe say no, right? Because there's a lot of power in no too. It feels a little bit like, oh, it won't happen again. People won't ask me, or I'm going to miss out or something, right? But I think at certain points you do have to go, hey, I'm going to minimally need this to be able to do it, to do what you're asking, whether it's participating in a show or participating in something else that's art related for your time. Because I think there is some power in no too, right? But you do have to, it's the hustle, right? You have to kind of figure out what are you balancing here, right? How much do you need what they're asking, or how much will this help you in some way as to where your goals are in your art practice or in what you do in the arts?
I 100% agree with the idea of learning to advocate for yourself as a process. I think for myself, as an artist, and definitely as someone who evolved into going from selling individual beanies and scarves at these pop-ups to doing public installations and workshops, me learning to advocate for myself was me learning to advocate for my work, and seeing my work as an extension of myself. Saying yes to all of the wrong projects and wrong programs really taught me that, really taught me what to value and kind of what I want to evolve into as an artist. And kind of realizing, if I say yes to all of these projects, all of these installations, how is my energy as an artist, as a human being, going into these projects? Is my work actually suffering? And is the work turning out to be what I want it to be, what I know it can be, with me kind of limiting the time to it because I've decided to take on 10 instead of focusing on the 2 that I really want to push. And so, yeah, for me, valuing my work really taught me to value more of myself and taught me what to actually say yes to. But that really took a lot of time for me to understand. And it's funny that the very first panel that offered me an honorarium was earlier this year. Carmen and I were on it with Gen Arts. But I was surprised that an honorarium was offered, because all the panels I had done previously, there was never any type of mention of that. And it became so common that I was used to it and came to not expect anything like that, but kept saying yes because these programs were things that I just wanted to be a part of because I liked being part of that community. So it definitely takes a lot of work.
Thank you so much. Like, so important to think about all the ways we value our time and how there are times when there aren't tangible benefits, but you are constantly it sounds like you're constantly kind of evaluating and calibrating. Like, I have all these opportunities, many of them are unpaid or low paid, but it's going to earn me these intangible outcomes. And like, you're doing so much labor there too, like kind of grappling with all these different opportunities to take or not. Thank you.
Totally. And kind of just off of that subject of valuing yourself, valuing your work, I'd love to know, what opportunities have you said no to because you wanted to stay aligned with your value versus doing it for any of those reasons that we just mentioned, for that exposure, for that paycheck, because it was simply just a paycheck? Yeah, what have you said no to that hurt or didn't hurt?
Well, I kind of had to recently make that choice, right? It was just in the pandemic, when the pandemic hit, the museum that I had been working with the curator to have a solo exhibition that was set to be for this spring. Because of the pandemic, they let go of the curator. And it was devastating to me, in the sense of, like, it was so quick and early. And I felt that that the decision by the director and board to do that, to make that choice, was really just not ill-considered, right? Especially when that curator was a person of color. So I really felt that philosophically, I needed to take a stand, right? To be able to say, I thought it was the wrong choice. I really wish that, unfortunately, and I get it, that there's a lot of financial constraints in the institution, but it just was so sudden and so early, and just didn't feel like they were fighting for them. And so and according to my values of really wanting to support curators of color as well, that I felt like I needed to step away from that exhibit opportunity. And it was hard. It was not an easy choice, because it's at the same time, it's like, well, when I was talking to my friends and my family about, like, should I do this, should I not? I really felt that, because of my values and aligning with my values, that I needed, that was the choice, right? I needed to make, versus just, oh, go ahead, just keep doing the show. I just, like, no, doesn't feel good, right? Just for my own values. So yeah, sometimes you do. And I think I wanted to be able to feel okay when I woke up in the morning, right? Like, in terms of myself. So as hard as that choice was for me.
Yeah, my memory also goes back to just needing to leave my last position before working at Local Color was really intense, because, like, as a nonprofit worker, I'm sure other people can relate that, like, you just get so, like, intertwined, and you're like, if I leave this, like, all these things won't happen anymore, like, without me. And it's like, a very irrational thought. It's like, of course, if you leave, they'll probably just hire someone else, and, like, they'll be fine. But that's really not what you're thinking. You're thinking about your experiences and, like, how much you've gained, and, like, is this, next opportunity. For me at the time, it wasn't even like a for sure thing. I just felt like, in good conscience, like, I needed to let them know, because this would have a really significant impact, because they're another small team. But sometimes, and I'm sure this will happen too with I saw, like, a lot of a boom of, like, collectives, and there's times when you all can share a united purpose, but then there will be times when you start branching off and you start having, like, different specific focuses. And I think there is a way to step away and to do that without severing relationships, and for just allowing whatever growth needs to happen. So it's scary, but also something just really need to push through. And I feel like it's very an intuitive, like, when, like Pilar was saying, like, if you're gonna lose sleep over this, if it's something you're thinking about every day, and it's really at odds with your values, I don't think that's something that we need to compromise, because there is an abundance of opportunities out there.
I really love hearing both of your stories, because it's that great reminder that we are not alone in this dilemma of wanting to stick to our values and not wanting to let others down. We all live in the Bay Area, and sometimes we need to take on a couple side jobs because this is Silicon Valley, and we do all work in a sector that is essentially the most underpaid of all of them, even though we have, all these tech companies around us. But I was recently approached to make some DIY how-to videos, and that isn't necessarily what I do as an artist, but I knew that I had those skills. And time again, folks will say, your personality is great. That'll carry through. Can you just be the face of our brand, but not really be our brand? So it was one of those battles of, okay, you're using my face to get your business further, but I'm not allowed to say, I am Alyssarhaye, I am Black Sheep Made. This isn't what I primarily do. So I wasn't sure how I wanted to support a company that didn't want to fully support me. And on top of that, I was putting in so much work into these videos where I took on learning a new video editor skills and all of these other things. And I thought, it's fine that they're not necessarily meeting my rate, because it's these skills that I'm attaining, that I'm acquiring, that is really, the quote unquote, the payment. But in the end, I knew that I wasn't giving it my all. Bixby says hello. I wasn't giving it my all. And therefore, I really just had to turn around and say, thank you for this opportunity, but it's not going to work moving forward. And a little to my surprise, but not, they actually came back and said, that's fine. We don't really know what we're doing. We don't really know if that's even the direction we want to keep going. So it almost justified, my decision in, I don't want to commit to this. And I'm very glad that I was able to stand up and say no, because it would have been so much worse if I kept kind of forcing myself to figure this project out for them to not even use it in the end. And I think it's just those moments where we really need to listen to those values that we set for ourselves and really to our gut. My mom likes to say she always listens to her gut. And I kind of always thought, Mom, stop. But she's right. We really have to listen to those feelings that we have. And it's really that internal moral compass, that value compass that keeps us on the right path.
Wow. Yeah. I mean, just really, I love how we've been talking about values here and really, getting down to that core of who you are and, what you want, what you need to get out of a given opportunity or experience. And, to kind of go back to the sort of the interplay between cultural institutions and artists, who, often are encountering one another about those opportunities, like come have an exhibit with us, come do a video series with us, like work for us. What is the importance of the nonprofit, museum, and commercial gallery realm to your work? And are there differences there between organizations like that?
Yeah, I think all those organizations, all those institutions have different roles in terms of supporting artists, because not only are all those kinds of places potential jobs for working artists, right? In being preparators, installation people, curators, education staff, right? Teachers, right? That may be parts of museums and galleries. And even for-profit galleries. I feel like it's an ecosystem, right? So that you can participate, possibly, right? Hopefully that you're getting exhibited in these places, or they're showing your work or sharing your work or showcasing things that you do. Or you have a job, or you're getting exposure, or you're an audience member too. I mean, I go, regularly to museums and galleries to see work, right? To me, it's part of my own education as an artist, right? I want to see what's happening. I want to see who's showing. So got to go see the Sawyer Rose show at NUMU, right? Sounds super, super interesting, up my alley. So I do think that it's important that these are very, very part of the ecosystem, right? That support artists through all those different facets. Right?
Yes, I definitely agree, echoing Pilar, and also wanting to add the layer of the importance of racial equity and how that shapes, how who's in kind of directing the resources that nonprofits, museums, and commercial galleries have. I just definitely think of these institutions to artists as the conduits of space, of a platform to share a message, of jobs, of commissions. And I think like who is in those roles really makes an impact. And I feel proud of what I've done with my position and my role in that as a nonprofit arts worker, in the services that Local Color provides. And we genuinely center artists in what we do. We all have some art background to some degree and have experienced the unique difficulties of being an artist and wanting to sustain yourself off of that work. So having that understanding allows us to meet those needs a bit better, creating very low barrier experiences. Some folks, like even the terminology didactic, like I know that because I went to school and got a degree in art history. But if my work is at the level of someone who's like in a fancy gallery who can get compensated and have patrons and buyers, but my experience showing my work is only in like a simple digital platform like Instagram that's accessible to everyone, but how do you translate that? That's mentorship, both in just financial understanding if you're a 1099 gig worker, to if you're kind of a digital artist looking to officialize yourself in the world of art markets. So I think, how do we build those bridges, keep those bridges going? Conversations like today definitely help.
Yeah, I think it's funny, I never really learned quite what a gallery was until I started working at NUMU, which was only a month ago. I always thought of a gallery as just like, oh, it's like a small museum. Like it's a small museum that allows local artists to show their work, not really connecting the fact that galleries sell the work that are on their walls, whereas museums, their collections, or they have guest artists such as Sawyer Rose show their work. And as an artist, I think it's really important for galleries to really emphasize and value the artist, because it's almost that kind of like the chicken and the egg question of who comes first. With the gallery, as an artist, we kind of need those galleries to show our work in some cases, but as a gallery, they need artists to show. And I had an experience when I was a senior in high school. I grew up with a father as an artist, and he, was always showing his work across the Bay Area. And I thought, oh, I can show my work, my not so great paintings, but at the time thinking they were super top notch. And I actually reached out to a local gallery and said, hi, I've visited your gallery so many times. I love the artists you feature. And I was wondering if I could have a show there, like, is that a possibility? And they flat out said, nope, you're too young. You don't have any experience. And, I'm at the time, of course, I was very upset, but I think as time went on, I grew to realize that, they, as a gallery, they do have to invest in the shows that they put on, that they market. And I think that, while they can't show everybody, I do feel that there are ways that galleries can support up and coming artists in ways that maybe a museum can't. And in that way, I think that, you know, programs like Art Now that NUMU has, and helping high school kids, you know, learn how to paint, learn how to write the title for your piece, learn how to exhibit in a proper show. I think programs like that are really important for younger artists to be able to transition into that bigger art world. And I think it's great that while the Bay Area, you know, has some of the least funded arts programs, we still have those programs that are fighting for the youth in that way. So really kind of, yeah, Amy, what else? What else?
Oh, no, I mean, was going to kind of mirror what you just said, that I really love the, you know, just having been back in the Silicon Valley arts community for 6 months after being away from it for like 15 years. You know, I really appreciate the boost I've seen in the community conversations about this topic and about supporting artists in our community. Like, I attended a fantastic talk between SV Creates and Silicon Valley Community Foundation that was really unpacking this, you know, this topic as well. How can the arts sector support artists in Silicon Valley, which has such a rich, you know, art community, and to keep it going and to stop kind of pushing people out so that they can afford a cost of living elsewhere, for example. So, you know, just anyway, just thank you so much for sharing these perspectives on how we can work together to make that dream a reality. So I know we're ready for some questions from folks at home. Anybody, you can raise a hand, you can put it in the chat, or else I suppose we could keep asking each other questions.
It looks like we have a question here from David Valdespino, and I'm just going to go ahead and read this out loud. Many people will not work for anything unless it is paid, as money is the value. But it seems like value derived from your artwork has a deeper intrinsic value. I have heard that young people come in contact with art can unlock that deeper value. And David is curious who or what experiences we all have had in our lives that have really unlocked the intrinsic value of art. Love that.
So many. Come back to me. I need to sort my thoughts.
Well, I'll take a stab at that. I mean, as an art educator and working with young people, that for me has also been a very, you know, I observe those kind of moments of where kids are like, they get the spark, they get the magic, you know, of an experience of, you know, everything from when they are working on a portfolio of work, a body of work, and they start to really get traction, right, during our critiques, and then like they have the aha moment. It's like, yep, you're seeing that, you're feeling it, you're seeing how things are evolving, your ideas solidifying, right? So I see it when they're making work. I see it when they get into the NUMU show, right? And they're like, Mr. Gore, I got in, oh my God, right? So that's such a great feeling. And then of course, going and seeing their work in the exhibition is just such a beautiful thing, right? I just a couple weeks ago was working with students, and we were executing a mural that the students designed this past semester. They worked in, there's a group of 4 students that collaborated, created a mural for a local homelessness organization called Home First. And it was just a connection that my friend Angie Helstrup, director ED of Makla, connected me to the ED of Home First. And we have a wall, we would love to have a mural. And so I proposed it to my students, do you guys want to do this? And they got really excited about designing something. So they had to learn about the organization. They had to learn about what are the issues that, you know, work with this client, you know, work with Andrea from Home First about what she was visioning. So it was a just fantastic process, right? But then last week we were there doing it, right? Executing it. And to have some of the clients come up to us, like there was a gentleman who now works at Home First, but he said, he pointed at the mural, he said, see that guy in the wheelchair? because there's an image of a person in a wheelchair in the mural. It's like, that was me when I came to Home First. I was homeless, and they took me in and they helped me get on my feet, and they saw potential in me. I got some education and I'm now trained and I work for Home First. It was just such a beautiful moment to have the students hear from this gentleman, right, who, you know, that responded to their work and had this like kind of little epiphany with them. And that to me is like, that's golden, right? That's the students being able to get that intrinsic value of something that they designed and they made and how it could touch somebody, right? I think that's where that's priceless, right? That's the priceless part of art that like makes you want to keep going to the well, keep doing it, right?
Yeah, I still definitely have like 10 different answers in my head. I'll say 3. So definitely one of them would have to be tattoos, and just wearing our tattoos as talismans and as conduits for our ancestors, either past or just not geologically with us. And like I said, I'm an arts administrator as well. So anything I've done in terms of presenting my own art has never been for economic gains, but just for the intrinsic value of kind of just the joy of seeing other people interacting with your art. If you kind of just like stand to the side and like, you know, it's very anonymous, and like, I'm definitely, you know, not a famous artist or anything. So just seeing people like engage with it, and then just have a conversation after that and let that build into something else that is you know, relationship driven, because we are social people and live in society together. I think those are some of my greatest joys, but also working with students. We were very stubborn in the knowing and feeling the need of having some youth activities after all of the uprisings, and we had a small recess program. We just worked with 12 students. They had fun, but I was just like feeling so much release inside to be able to have joy after orange skies and just so much communal grieving, and then just to share this moment of expression and learning and fun through the vehicle of art. That happened in September, and I still think back to that on a regular basis to like keep me going.
I'd have to agree. I also have way too many to choose from, which I'm so grateful for. One is definitely teaching. I've taught kids from 4 years old to adults who are, you know, well into their own careers and just wanted to take a Saturday mimosas and macrame class. But the adults always tend to come in with a little bit more fear than the kids do. And, you know, hearing kind of their incoming remarks of, you know, I'm an accountant, I'm not crafty, or I do heart surgery, I don't make things with my hands. You always kind of have to remind them, well, you do things with your hands, and you know how to, and however this piece comes out, it's going to be unique to you. And so my joy really comes from hearing those initial comments when we're all introducing ourselves in a workshop space, and then them leaving with their finished piece saying like, I made this, can you take a picture of me? Like, I can't wait to hang this in my home. And I just love seeing that spirit come alive at the end, and them realizing that they can too make something, and it doesn't matter that their career is in a completely different field. And additionally, I grew up with a family of artists, from, you know, musicians, photographers, but seeing my father carry on his artistic career just through the decades, and seeing, you know, all of the things that he's learned from it, and seeing how, you know, he may not have a giant mural in the Bay Area, or he might not be at SJMA, but he carries on, and he somehow makes this artistic career work, where he was able to, you know, raise a family and still do what he loved. And I think for me that really just seeing that from a young age really opened to my eyes to the possibilities of pursuing your passion, however hard it is, and still being able to create your own little circle.
Those are such wonderful testimonials. I mean, and David, thanks for bringing up this question, because yeah, the value of art touches all of us. And we hear this in museums a lot, like, oh, I can't draw a straight line. But when you start working with folks and practicing and drawing, taking photographs, I mean, it's such a beautiful experience to share together, and for somebody to have that aha moment of, wow, I did make something that I'm proud of. That's priceless. We have a question from Michelle, our Intrepid Education Manager. Michelle, would you like me to read your question, or I'll read it for you? Okay, thanks. So Michelle asks, how do you find the balance between making art from that place of aligned inner values versus needing to make money to survive? She's found in her own practice that she experiences emotional burnout with the pressure that art needs to be a business to be seen and heard.
Something that's kind of changed my on impact has been Agent Marie Brown's Emergent Strategies. And I think it really applies, you can apply it to anything, and the idea that our actions have these ripple effects, and to find just as much fulfillment in those smaller ripples as there are those larger ones. So I think that there is some like philosophical change that can relieve that pressure. But however, if that kind of commercial, marketable artist success is something that you're looking for, hop on YouTube University, and there are people who have walked that path that are sharing that information for free, how to research art markets, utilizing the power of algorithms to take advantage of our current technologies and ability to share our work and to get it seen, to grow from a local presence to also making connections in arts communities in other cities. Yeah, there's a lot of different ways, but knowing someone that is somewhere you're trying to go, and trying to get some modeling and mentoring, even as a professional artist, is really helpful. I feel like that kind of helped shaped my direction, because my professor at San Francisco State, Sean McFarland, was both a professor and a professional artist, and shared that experience with us in our classes. And it really just helped me think about my trajectory as I was learning my skills as an artist. So I appreciate all of the mentors that I've had.
That's great, Carmen. Thank you for jumping in there.
I think for me, my experience with keeping aligned with my values is really a process of trial and error, kind of like what we talked about earlier. I took on some long-term pop-ups where my idea was to lean heavily on taking in custom orders, because for me, the joy was bringing someone else's idea to life. And it took a while for me to realize that while I did enjoy that, sometimes their ideas wouldn't align with the work I wanted to make. And I reached a point where I had to say, do I want to keep taking on these custom orders because it's what's paying my bills? Or do I want to put a stop to it and take some time away and really start to focus on the work that I do want to make, and put that energy and love into that work and give that a chance, to pay my bills? And maybe there will be some intersection of where I can do both. But for me, I had to start out a little bit, making things I wanted to make, but also kind of play around with those custom ideas to really understand what I wanted to make at all.
Yeah, and for me, really early on, right after I got out of my undergrad, I was very clear that I needed to figure out how I was going to put food on the table that was not reliant on having to sell my work. Because I knew really early on that I wanted to make my work that, I didn't care if anybody would buy it, right? Like I wanted to have the freedom to make the work that I wanted to make and not having the concern of doing it to please somebody, right? Um, so then I started teaching, right? It was kind of something that I started, but I tried a lot of different things, from teaching. Then I went to administration. I worked at San José Museum of Art and in their art school and managing the program. And then, then tried to curating, went to Makla, did that for a while, right? And curated shows and did different things that kind of blending education and exhibitions. But I think through the process, I realized, what's probably going to be and make it most possible for me to continue to make my work is to go back to teaching. And it was at the time that my daughter was born. She was a couple years old, and it was like, yeah, it's got a cycle because now I even got a family, right? So that just made it more clear that teaching was probably the thing that was going to give me the most brain space, and then eventually times, right, where summer breaks and different kinds of the school schedule just worked best for me to allow me to keep my own personal practice going. But it took a little bit of time figuring that out, right? Because I totally understand how you feel, Michelle. And like, I don't want to compromise that, right? I don't want to feel that. But then what do I do, right? So it is, I think, something that you got to kind of figure out that for you. Because some people, maybe it's waiting tables, right? Like working in a restaurant. I don't write like something that was going to give them the maximum amount of time, money, and space. Because sometimes if it's also very exhausting, you may not have the brain space, right? If it's a physical exhausting or mentally exhausting, you have to figure out that balance, right? Like, what is it? How is it that you can still make the work? Because that's the most important thing, right? Is being able to have the time to make the work.
Just to highlight that idea of balance, I just have one last thing to add. Prior to working at NUMU, I was a full-time artist, and I was kind of in that limbo of, do I want to continue making work, or how do I sustain this career? And when this opportunity at NUMU came up, it was kind of like the answer to all my questions, because it allows me to participate in this position that I'm in at NUMU allows me to participate in conversations like this and be in the arts world, and a completely different arts world, the fine arts world, and still be involved in the community, and then able to, outside of work, reclaim art for myself, and not have to rely on selling my beanies or selling a wall hanging. So just really thankful for NUMU and this job. But overall, I'd really like to thank Carmen and Pilar and Amy for having this discussion with us. This has been really great and eye-opening. And again, that solidarity of knowing that we as artists and just in the arts world are all going through this has been really awesome. And so thank you for tuning in. I'd like to turn it over to Amy right quick. But yeah, thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Oh my gosh. And Alyssarhaye, thank you for bringing Pilar and Carmen to us. And thank you, Pilar and Carmen, for being here today and having this incredibly valuable conversation. So just want to say some parting words to please, come visit NUMU, come see Sawyer's work in person. Part of those transformational art experiences that we have when we're with artwork and experiencing it together. We have that for you right now. So here's a little link to the show. We're open Friday through Sunday, and we're talking about open and late on Thursday. So stay tuned for that. Also more programs, really unpacking the different fascinating conversations that we were all inspired by Sawyer's work. And just thank you all, and have a wonderful rest of your week.